I want to start by talking about a really specific, almost invisible ritual that, well, that practically all of us share.
Oh, yeah. Like a daily habit kind of thing.
Exactly. But it happens in the solitary quiet of an ordinary morning. Just imagine the scenario, right? You wake up, the room is still steeped in these heavy shadows before the dawn.
Right. That really quiet, almost liminal space before the day actually starts.
Yeah, exactly. So you swing your legs over the edge of the mattress, your bare feet hit the chill of the floorboards,
Mm-hmm.
and in the background, there's just that low, steady, mechanical hum of the refrigerator. It's kind of anchoring the silence, you know?
I can hear perfectly. It's a very universal feeling.
But then, almost immediately, and this is the crazy part, before a single conscious thought even fully forms in your head, there's this involuntary instinct.
The reach.
The reach, yes. Your hand just automatically goes out to illuminate the darkness with a glowing screen.
It's completely reflexive. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just this motorized habit that we execute before the day has even truly begun.
It's wild when you think about it.
It really is. We're
Yeah.
reaching for this connection to the external world
Mm-hmm.
before we've even established any sort of connection with our own internal state.
And I find that reaching motion just so fascinating because I think it sets the tone for this pervasive modern sensation that we all kind of live with.
Like a lingering feeling you carry around.
Yeah, exactly. Because you go through the familiar motions after that screen lights up, right?
Yeah.
You pour a warm cup of coffee, the bitter aroma fills the kitchen, you sit down at your desk to start your work.
Right. Checking the boxes of a normal day.
Totally. And from the outside, your life looks, well, perfectly functional. But underneath that functional veneer, you're carrying this invisible, heavy weight of restlessness.
Yeah, that quiet dissatisfaction.
Right. You're doing everything seemingly right, you know? You avoid the major disasters. You show up when you're supposed to show up. You pay the bills.
You're not actively crashing the car.
Exactly. Yet there is this low-grade dissatisfaction that just, it won't dissipate. It's not a dramatic failure.
No explosions.
No explosions at all. It's more like a subtle, quiet decay of ambition, the sensation of coasting while an inner fire just slowly dims to embers.
And honestly, coasting is such a deceptive state to be in.
Hmm.
I'd argue it's perhaps the most dangerous place a human being can exist.
Really. More dangerous than, like, actively failing.
Without a doubt. Because it lacks the absolute urgency of a crisis, right?
Yeah.
It's just a slow, quiet erosion of your potential.
That makes sense. I mean, if everything goes wrong, you have to react.
Precisely. When a system crashes, the alarms sound, and you are entirely forced to fix it. But when you're just coasting, you're suspended in this persistent state of...
Almost.
You're not falling out of the sky, but you're definitely not flying either.
Exactly. You're just sort of suspended in a lukewarm equilibrium, and it's so comfortable that you don't even realize you're stuck.
Well, today our mission is to completely unravel the invisible mechanics of profound personal reinvention so we can actually escape that lukewarm equilibrium.
It's a vital conversation to have. We need to look past the surface level stuff. Yeah, we are completely bypassing the hollow, vague motivation that, well, you know, it just litters the whole self-improvement space.
Absolutely. The just try harder advice is entirely useless.
Right. Instead, we want to expose the hidden systems that govern human potential. We are looking for the structural blueprints to shift from this state of passive drifting to a life of intentional, aligned living.
But to construct that kind of truly aligned life, I think we have to start from a rather uncomfortable, kind of counterintuitive position.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What kind of position?
Well, before we can build a new reality, we actually first have to confront the absolute certainty of how to destroy one.
Wait, starting with destruction, I mean, that feels a bit jarring. Why would we focus on the wreckage when the whole goal here is to build something beautiful?
I know it sounds backwards, but it comes down to this concept known as the inversion principle.
The inversion principle. Okay, break that down for me.
So mathematical thinkers and engineers use this constantly. If you want to deeply understand the mechanics of profound growth, the absolute fastest way to do it is to study decay.
Oh, I see. So you look at the opposite of what you want.
Exactly. The human mind often struggles to conceptualize this perfect, abstract ideal of success, mainly because it's so incredibly subjective.
Right. Success looks different for everybody.
But failure, absolute ruin, that is remarkably universal.
Wow, yeah. I guess the ways to ruin a life are pretty standard across the board.
They really are. So by examining the precise blueprint for absolute failure, We automatically illuminate the structural, load-bearing walls of success.
We study the architecture of ruin, so we know exactly which pillars we can never allow to weaken.
That's the exact idea.
Okay, so let's reverse engineer this catastrophe. If we were going to intentionally draft a blueprint to completely dismantle a life, to ensure absolute ruin, without just relying on some sudden tragedy, where do we even start?
Well, the foundation of this architecture of ruin almost always begins with our resources.
So financial stagnation, that feels like a massive primary pillar.
It is the absolute bedrock of ruin because, you see, financial decay creates this pervasive ambient anxiety that just poisons every other system in your life.
But I imagine this blueprint for financial ruin doesn't necessarily require, like, making grand, reckless gambles at a casino.
Not at all. That's the cinematic version of ruin. The real blueprint simply requires a persistent, willful blindness to reality. It absolutely thrives on the neurobiology of avoidance.
I think I've actually felt the sensory experience of that exact avoidance.
Oh, most people have. What does it feel like for you?
It's like it's that sudden, sharp sting of a forgotten subscription renewing in the background of your life, pinging your phone.
Yes, that tiny little jolt of panic.
And it's the quiet dread that washes over you when you actively choose to just swipe away a notification from your bank.
You don't want to look.
No, you completely ignore the numbers because looking at the raw data of your resources brings just way too much cortisol into your system.
It hurts to look.
It really does. And then in this twisted loop of logic, to soothe the very anxiety that's caused by ignoring your finances, you reach for the numbing anesthesia of, like, an instant late-night delivery.
Oh, absolutely. The classic comfort purchase.
Right. A meal arrives at your door, you consume it in the artificial glow of a screen, and for just a fleeting heartbeat, that dread is pacified.
What you're describing there is a classic negative feedback loop, and it's entirely driven by cognitive dissonance.
Cognitive dissonance, so the clash between what we know we should do and what we're actually doing.
Exactly. The brain experiences literal psychological pain when it's confronted with the gap between our desired financial state and our actual daily behavior.
And to eliminate the pain, we don't actually change the behavior, do we?
No, we take the easy way out. We simply eliminate the data. We refuse to look at it.
We just construct these elaborate narratives to justify the leakage of our resources.
Oh, the narratives are incredibly creative. We tell ourselves that the broader economic system is just entirely broken anyway.
Right, like why even try? Or that saving is a mathematical impossibility for someone in our specific situation.
Yeah, or that delaying gratification is this antiquated concept for people who just don't know how to enjoy the present moment.
We convince ourselves that instant consumer gratification is basically a form of necessary self-care.
Which is such a toxic distortion of self-care. Financial ruin requires zero effort. It is oxygenated entirely by illiteracy and avoidance.
Man, that is heavy. And I feel like that avoidance in our external resources directly mirrors the avoidance in our physical vessel, our bodies.
Oh, they're intimately connected.
If financial ruin is about avoiding the numbers, then physical rust is about the body just completely forgetting its biological mandate to move.
Physical rust, that's a great way to phrase it.
It's the active daily choice to just sink deeply into the softest cushions available, treating literally any form of physical tension as an absolute threat.
Right, rather than seeing it as a biological necessity.
Exactly.
This is actually a prime example of evolutionary mismatch theory.
Evolutionary mismatch. How so?
Well, think about the vast expanse of human history. For the overwhelming majority of our existence, calories were incredibly scarce, and intense physical exertion was just mandatory for survival.
You had to move to eat.
Exactly. So our bodies naturally evolved to conserve energy whenever possible, simply because rest was so rare.
But now we live in this era of absolute abundance and engineered comfort.
Right. So when we follow our ancient programming, which is telling us to conserve energy, but we do it in a modern environment that demands absolutely zero physical effort, the result is rapid systemic physical decay.
Because the human body is a highly adaptive machine, right?
It's incredibly adaptive. If you command it to sit perpetually, it will literally optimize its entire structure for sitting.
Wow. So the muscles will atrophy, bone density will just plummet.
Yeah, and your metabolic pathways will essentially stall out.
And it extends so far beyond just the lack of movement, too. I mean, think about the choice of fuel.
The food we eat.
Yeah, we treat these processed, heavy, chemically engineered compounds as a primary source of emotional comfort.
Instead of viewing food as what it actually is, cellular fuel.
Exactly. We chase that sudden, sharp surge of chemical reward from, salt and refined sugars.
But that surge is always without fail, inevitably followed by a profound internal fog.
You just crash. And then we sacrifice our cellular repair for just one more episode of some digital narrative on a streaming service.
Keeping the room bright with artificial blue light.
Right, and noisy with synthetic sounds. We ensure that true, deep, restorative sleep remains perpetually out of reach.
And the craziest part is the cultural reaction to this.
Oh, you mean how we brag about it?
Yes, we have the absolute audacity to wear our chronic exhaustion like a badge of honor in social circles. Oh, I only slept a handful of hours last night.
It's like a competition of who can endure the most decay.
Exactly. And I want you to notice how the structural integrity of the individual is basically collapsing from the inside out here.
Yeah, it's compounding.
It is. When the financial foundation is rotting and the physical vessel is rusting away, the capacity for emotional regulation just completely disappears.
Your fuse gets incredibly short.
Exactly. And that triggers the next phase of the blueprint for ruin: relational isolation.
Right. And the decay of human connection, it doesn't usually happen through these explosive cinematic arguments, does it?
Rarely. It's much more insidious. It happens through microscopic, nearly invisible acts of neglect.
I see this constantly. It's the gradual rotting of connection through these tiny unspoken resentments that are just never aired out.
Yes, the things you swallow instead of saying.
And it's the heavy silence of ignored messages. You read it and you just don't reply.
Or you reply days later with a single word.
Right. It's the act of building these invisible defensive walls so high that literally nobody can scale them.
And then quietly convincing yourself that your intense loneliness is actually just a sign of your impossibly high standards for other people.
Nobody understands me, or nobody is on my level.
Yeah, precisely. We start treating the people around us as vending machines for our own emotional validation.
Oh, wow. Vending machines. That's a brutal analogy, but it's so true.
It is. And when they fail to dispense the exact affirmation we want in the exact moment we want it, we just withdraw our presence entirely.
We punish them with silence.
Exactly. We protect this very fragile, isolated ego by just twisting memories and completely avoiding any sense of accountability.
And the cognitive hypocrisy involved in this phase of ruin is just staggering.
How do you mean?
Well, we expect the overwhelming majority of people in our lives to execute flawless behavioral responses to our needs.
Right, absolutely. They have to read our minds perfectly.
But then we extend absolute zero grace when they inevitably falter simply because they are human beings.
The double standard is immense. And eventually you look around your curated, highly defended little life, and you realize the architecture of ruin is nearly complete.
You are just surrounded by the fading ghosts of relationships that you simply starved to death.
Starved through complete lack of attention and vulnerability.
It's tragic. And that brings us to the final cornerstone, right? To really seal the structure of this ruin.
Yes, mental atrophy.
Mental atrophy.
Yeah.
So if you want to guarantee that a person never, ever escapes this decaying architecture, what do?
You must ensure that their mind never encounters a single moment of uncharted stillness.
You just kill the silence.
Completely. You must continuously flood their cognitive bandwidth with endless streams of superficial entertainment.
Effectively killing the quiet space where true, independent, critical thoughts actually form.
Because the human brain legitimately requires periods of low stimulation. It needs that to consolidate memories, to process complex emotions, and to actually generate creative insights.
So to achieve mental atrophy, you just fill every waking millisecond with external noise.
Yes. You condition your attention span to reset every few moments.
By just swiping through endless, highly colorful feeds of short, fragmented videos.
Exactly. You outsource your deeply held opinions to the loudest, most aggressive voices in the digital room.
You refuse to read anything that challenges your current mental models.
You refuse to sit in quiet reflection.
And you treat any opposing viewpoint not as a chance to learn something new, but as this violent personal attack.
Which means you lock your worldview into this rigid, constantly shrinking cage, and you just throw away the key.
And at that point, intellectual and emotional growth permanently ceases. You are trapped in the ruin.
The blueprint is complete.
Okay, let me just pause our demolition for a second because this is intense.
This is a lot to take in.
When you lay out the architecture of ruin with such precision, I mean, The financial avoidance, the physical rusting, the relational starvation, the mental noise, it sounds so incredibly deliberate.
It sounds planned.
Right. It sounds almost malicious toward oneself, but when I observe human behavior, my own included, it rarely feels like an intentional demolition project.
Nobody sets out to do it.
Exactly. It's not like someone sets dynamite to their own foundation. It feels incredibly passive.
Passive is the perfect word for it.
It's less like a wrecking ball and much more like a neglected garden that's just being quietly overtaken by weeds, simply because pulling them out requires us to get our hands dirty.
Yes.
So my question is, are people actually choosing this ruin?
Your distinction right there between the wrecking ball and the weeds, that is the exact center of the entire issue.
Really? Because it feels like a subtle difference.
It's everything. Because the terrifying truth about this anti-blueprint is that ruin requires absolutely zero effort.
None at all.
None. We are dealing with the psychological equivalent of entropy.
Entropy.
Like in physics.
Exactly like in physics. Entropy dictates that any closed system, if you just leave it to its own devices, will naturally move from a state of order to a state of maximum disorder.
Things naturally fall apart.
Precisely. A sandcastle does not require a deliberate, violent kick to fall apart.
No, the wind and the tide will do the job simply through the passage of eras.
The exact same principle applies to human potential. You do not have to actively choose ruin. You merely have to stop actively choosing growth. And gravity just takes care of the rest.
Gravity takes care of the rest.
Wow. Entropy of the soul. That is a haunting phrase.
It's the default state of a neglected life.
But if we understand this anti-blueprint, this inversion, it actually hands us a really remarkable tool, doesn't it?
The ultimate tool.
Right, because if we know that avoiding the raw data of our resources leads to this financial fog, the direct counteraction is completely obvious.
You have to ruthlessly stare at the numbers.
Exactly. And if we know that endless algorithmic noise causes mental atrophy, then the counter is clear.
We must deliberately manufacture pockets of absolute silence in our daily routine.
The power of the inversion principle is that it entirely removes the ambiguity from success.
Yes, it clears away all the vague advice. When you expose the invisible traps in high definition like this, you can start laying bricks in the exact opposite direction.
But, just moving away from total ruin doesn't automatically land you in a state of profound growth, does it?
I'm so glad you brought that up because no, it doesn't.
It usually lands you in a much more common and honestly far more insidious psychological trap.
We have to examine the illusion of safety.
The middle ground. The gentle drift.
Yes, what we colloquially call the comfort zone.
The comfort zone. Everyone talks about getting out of it, but what is it really?
Well, first of all, the term comfort zone is a severe misnomer.
Misnomer? Why?
Because it is not a place of peace. It's not a place of true rest or genuine comfort. It is functionally a psychological sedative.
A sedative, how so?
Because we use it to numb ourselves to the reality of our stagnation. We convince ourselves that we are just taking a break.
Or that we are waiting for the perfect alignment of circumstances.
The timing just isn't right yet.
Exactly. But waiting is a highly deceptive master. It convinces us that our inaction is somehow a form of preparation.
Which is brilliant, logically, because it lets you off the hook completely.
It really does. I think about the staggering passage of eras, entire chapters of human lives, utterly lost to the phrase, maybe tomorrow.
It is the absolute tragedy of coasting.
But why does coasting feel so safe?
Because it disguises itself as stability. You have to remember how the human sensory system is designed. It's built to detect changes in velocity, not absolute speed.
Wait, explain that, like physically.
Yeah, physically. If you are sitting in an airplane moving at a constant high rate of speed, you feel entirely still. You can sip a cup of coffee.
Right, you don't feel the speed unless there's turbulence or the plane drops.
Exactly. In life, if you are not actively falling backwards, if you aren't experiencing that negative acceleration, you just assume your trajectory is fine.
You feel stable.
But coasting is merely moving forward on the fading momentum of your past efforts.
And momentum, in a universe governed by friction, eventually and inevitably halts.
It always comes to a stop. Always.
Let's try to ground this in a really visceral, real-world scenario so we can see it in action.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine a creative professional. It could be a writer, an architect, or an entrepreneur sitting before a blinking cursor on a completely blank white screen.
A very intimidating position.
Right. The tension of having to create something entirely new out of thin air, of having to synthesize chaotic thoughts into a structured reality, it feels terrifying.
Because it requires immense cognitive lifting. It's hard work.
It is. And the amygdala, the fear center of the brain, it often registers this high cognitive demand as an actual physical threat.
It literally says, this is dangerous, retreat.
Yes. So instead of typing that first, messy, incredibly difficult sentence, what do? They open a new digital tab.
The escape hatch.
They switch over to just mindlessly scroll a colorful, infinite feed of images and curated opinions.
And in that tiny, fleeting heartbeat of a decision,
Yeah.
a massive psychological transaction has just occurred.
Exactly the point. In that split second, they have traded the heavy, long-term pride of growth and accomplishment for the weightless, short-term, immediate relief of distraction.
They opted for the sedative over the surgery.
The sedative over the surgery, that's a powerful way to frame it.
And this specific behavioral pattern is what optimization theorists and systems thinkers call being trapped in a local minimum.
A local minimum. What does that landscape look like?
Well, imagine a vast, undulating landscape of hills and valleys. You've climbed a small hill, you put in some effort in the past, and now you have descended into this shallow, comfortable little valley.
Okay, I'm in the valley.
And it feels incredibly safe down there because you are no longer sliding down a steep, terrifying cliff.
I'm not failing.
Right. You have achieved a baseline stability. But you are surrounded by walls. To reach the highest peak in the landscape, which we would call the global maximum, you have to be willing to climb out of that comfortable valley.
And climbing out means going up the steep wall.
It requires a temporary period where things get much harder. It requires exertion, vulnerability, and the very real risk of sliding backward.
So we avoid the climb, and we just get trapped in what feels like this void loop.
We just circle the valley.
We mistake the absolute absence of acute failure for actual meaningful progress.
Yes.
We look around our shallow valley and we think, well, my life isn't a raging disaster, there are no fires, so I must be doing okay.
I'm surviving.
But we are just endlessly circling the bottom of a very comfortable teacup, completely ignorant of the vast ocean, just over the rim.
And the human mind is absolutely brilliant at rationalizing this stasis.
Oh, we have the best excuses.
We claim we are just gathering more information.
I'm doing research.
Right.
Yeah.
We tell ourselves we are in a season of meticulous preparation for the grand launch of our new identity.
But preparation that completely lacks a definitive deadline for execution is just highly sophisticated procrastination.
Exactly. It's simply the ego protecting itself from the heavy friction of reality.
You know, this highlights a cultural phenomenon that I find genuinely surprising and honestly a little alarming.
What's that?
We have somehow managed to weaponize the concept of comfort against our own potential.
Weaponized comfort, yes.
We wrap our avoidance of difficult tasks in the therapeutic language of wellness.
Oh, this happens constantly now.
We declare, I am practicing self-care by avoiding this difficult conversation with my partner.
Or, I am honoring my personal boundaries by not pushing myself to finish this project today.
Yes. We have literally hijacked the vocabulary of psychological health to justify profound stagnation.
It is a brilliant, highly destructive deception of the modern mind.
It's wild how common it is.
Because when you continually normalize avoidance under the guise of self-care, your biological and psychological capacity to handle difficulty literally contracts.
Your tolerance shrinks.
Your nervous system becomes hypersensitive to even minor stressors. You become smaller in spirit.
Because resilience is a muscle, right?
Exactly. And a muscle only grows when subjected to progressive overload.
So if you remove all the friction, the muscle just wastes away.
And this intense desire to constantly seek comfort and completely avoid friction, it's largely fueled by what I consider one of the greatest philosophical and psychological misconceptions in human history.
I know exactly where you're going with this, the mirage of mood.
Yes, the insidious trap of chasing happiness.
This is huge. Modern society has overwhelmingly convinced the vast majority of people that the direct, aggressive pursuit of happiness is the ultimate goal of existence.
It's sold to us every single day.
But if you analyze human psychology and systems theory objectively, you will find that happiness is a lagging indicator.
It is never the target.
It is the echo.
Exactly.
It is the ripple on the surface of the water long after the heavy stone has been thrown.
If you aim directly for happiness, you will inevitably miss it entirely. It's a fundamental paradox.
And the reason aiming for happiness fails so spectacularly is that when we chase it directly, what we are really chasing is a highly volatile mood.
A transient state.
We're chasing a fleeting emotional high. And I can describe the hollow sensation of that pursuit perfectly.
Hate the picture.
It's the rush of a new, highly anticipated purchase arriving at your door. You tear open the cardboard, and for a brief, shining moment, you feel that sharp spike of acquisition.
The dopamine hits.
Or it's the intense chemical rush from a decadent, sugary dessert. Or perhaps it's the sudden, vibrating notification on a glowing screen telling you that someone, somewhere in the ether, approved of an image you broadcasted to the world.
And all of those experiences are like a solitary spark in a massive dark cavern.
Yes. A spark that illuminates the tavern for a fraction of a second, but then the brain's neurochemistry instantly adapts.
The baseline resets.
The dopamine recedes, the darkness rushes back in, and you are left with this intense, desperate craving to search for the next hit, to recreate that specific chemical surge.
You are outlining the exact mechanics of hedonic adaptation.
Hedonic adaptation. We just get used to the pleasure.
We do. Our neurological baseline is designed to constantly reset. You have to remember, evolution did not wire us to be permanently happy. It wired us to survive.
Right. Complacency equals death in the wild.
Exactly. If a hunter-gatherer caught a meal and remained blissfully happy and perfectly satisfied forever, they would just sit there and starve the next week.
The dissatisfaction is literally built into the hardware.
It's a survival mechanism.
Yeah.
So if you build your entire life architecture around chasing those transient sparks, you are essentially running on an endless accelerating treadmill.
You are burning massive amounts of energy just to remain emotionally stationary.
Which is precisely why we must starkly contrast the extreme fragility of mood with the incredible load-bearing durability of meaning.
We have to choose meaning over mood.
Every single time.
Because a mood will vanish the moment you lose a single night of sleep.
Oh, completely.
A mood evaporates when the ambient temperature of a room is just slightly too hot, or when a stranger cuts you off in traffic. It is entirely unstable.
It's entirely at the mercy of the external environment.
But meaning is a biological and psychological anchor.
It holds you steady.
Meaning is what gets a human being out of a warm bed in the deepest, most freezing quiet of the night to care for a crying child.
Even when the mood is pure exhaustion.
Exactly. Meaning is what drives an individual to endure decades of failure to build a legacy or cure a disease, completely regardless of the daily friction and the utter lack of joy in the process.
So if meaning is so undeniably powerful, if it is this ultimate, unshakable anchor that allows humans to endure immense suffering, why is the overwhelming majority of society completely addicted to chasing the fleeting spark of happiness instead?
Why is the default state of humanity to chase the mood?
Because meaning is extraordinarily heavy.
Heavy.
Yes. Happiness, or rather the superficial synthetic pleasure that we constantly confuse with happiness, it requires absolutely nothing from you.
It's passive.
It only requires consumption. You sit, you consume the food, you consume the media, you consume the validation.
It's so easy.
But meaning requires carrying weight. It requires taking on profound responsibility for yourself and, very often, for others.
It demands that you endure the intense, burning friction of growth.
The road to genuine, unshakable fulfillment is paved with immense discomfort, while the road to complete stagnation is lined with effortless, highly accessible pleasures.
So, meaning essentially asks you to grow up.
In a way, yes.
It demands that you look outward toward a purpose instead of constantly monitoring your internal emotional state. You cannot simply consume your way into a meaningful life.
You cannot. You have to produce. You have to serve. You have to willingly carry a heavy load.
And making that transition from a passive consumer of fleeting pleasure to an active carrier of deep meaning that requires an entirely different operating system, doesn't it?
It does. It requires a fundamental understanding of how our behaviors and our outcomes are actually regulated on a daily basis.
Which brings us perfectly to the hidden machinery of our daily lives, the control systems and the mechanics of the self.
This is where we get into the practical architecture.
If we look at human behavior through the lens of systems thinking, particularly cybernetics, we realize that life does not happen in a vacuum.
No, it's a dynamic system.
Human behavior operates very much like a mechanical thermostat.
I love this analogy. Let's break down this thermostat of reality.
Let's do it, because it clarifies so much about why we drift. Think about a thermostat in a building. It's designed to continuously measure the current state of a room's temperature against a specifically programmed target.
The baseline you set on the dial.
Right. And if the room drops below the target, the system triggers the furnace to generate heat.
And if it gets too hot, it exceeds the target. It triggers the cooling mechanism.
It is a constant automatic calibration.
It is a continuous feedback loop. It measures the reality, it compares it to the ideal, and it corrects the discrepancy.
But here's the critical failure point for most individuals. If you have no target programmed into your internal system, the thermostat does absolutely nothing.
It's just off,
You simply drift with the ambient temperature of your external environment.
which is terrifying if you think about it.
It is, because if you are surrounded by an ecosystem of people who are cynical, stagnant, and financially reckless, your internal temperature will effortlessly and unconsciously match theirs.
Because your system has absolutely no counter-programming.
Without an internal target forcing a correction, you are entirely at the mercy of the weather.
Exactly. So what does taking control of this system actually look like in practice?
It comes down to understanding the profound difference between leading and lagging indicators.
This distinction is absolutely vital for any form of reinvention.
Most people obsess entirely over lagging indicators.
Oh, completely. They stare at the bank account balance. They agonize over the number on the biological scale. They fixate on the end-of-year sales report.
But those numbers are essentially ghosts.
Ghosts of the past.
They represent the accumulation of past actions. You cannot change a lagging indicator in the present moment any more than you can change yesterday's weather.
It is logically impossible.
It's like trying to alter the trajectory of a massive ship by constantly staring at the wake churning in the water behind it.
Right. The wake just tells you where you have been.
It has zero power to steer you where you are going. The steering wheel, the angle of the rudder, those are your leading indicators.
So staring at your bank account does nothing but generate a massive cortisol response and anxiety.
But mastering the daily, controllable inputs, that changes everything.
Like how many times you choose to cook a nutritious meal at home instead of ordering out.
Yes. Or how many hours you spend acquiring a complex new skill instead of scrolling a feed.
That alters the angle of the rudder.
It changes the entire trajectory of the system over the passage of eras.
And when you focus relentlessly on the leading indicators, the lagging indicators inevitably resolve themselves.
The harvest will come if you just focus on the watering.
But here is the catch. To maintain focus on those inputs, you require a highly functional feedback loop.
And the tragic, undeniable reality is that the overwhelming majority of people suffer from a fundamentally broken feedback loop.
It's completely shattered for most.
So what causes that loop to break down so consistently? Why are we so bad at taking feedback?
The primary destructive force is the human ego.
Where ego gets in the way.
Every time. When faced with a poor outcome, let's say a failed creative project, or a declining health metric, or a deeply fractured relationship, the necessary logical response of a functional system is to observe the raw data, accept the failure of the current strategy, and adjust the input.
Just tweak the thermostat.
Right. But instead of accepting the data, people rationalize.
They start making excuses.
They blame the macroeconomic climate. They blame their genetic lineage. They blame their childhood upbringing. They blame their partner's inadequacies.
They violently reject the feedback simply to protect their fragile self-image.
They shoot the messenger because the message implies they are at fault.
And in doing so, they practically guarantee that the exact same failure will repeat itself in a continuous, endless loop.
Because no adjustment is ever made.
It requires profound, almost painful humility to look at the raw, unvarnished data of your life, to feel the sharp sting of inadequacy, and to use that psychological pain as fuel to course correct instantly, rather than as an excuse to hide.
Humility is the engine of the feedback loop. Without that profound humility, there is no correction.
And without correction, there is absolutely no growth. You are flying a highly complex machine completely blind.
It's like trying to navigate a spacecraft without checking your telemetry data.
Oh, that's a perfect image.
If you aren't constantly reading the instruments, sensing the subtle gravitational pulls, and firing the thrusters to make continuous microscopic adjustments, you don't just hover in place.
No, the endless, silent pull of celestial mechanics drifts you millions of miles off course.
You drift into the absolute void, entirely convinced that you're just waiting for the stars to align.
It is a deeply sobering perspective on the ultimate cost of ignored feedback.
It is. So if we now fully comprehend the architecture of ruin, the intense peril of the comfort zone, the deceptive trap of chasing mood, and the absolute necessity of a calibrated feedback loop,
The ultimate question remains.
how do we actually construct a new reality? How do we arrest the drift and start actively building?
We have to architect an entirely new identity. And crucially, we have to construct a physical and digital environment that sustains it.
We have to define our North Star.
Defining the North Star. So this is the act of setting that precise target on the internal thermostat we just discussed.
Exactly. But it cannot be a vague, nebulous wish.
I want to be successful is not a target.
No, it is a platitude. And I want to be happy is a trap, as we've already established.
Right. So the North Star must be a vividly painted, hyper-specific destination that demands the alignment of your physical vitality, your allocation of resources, your chosen connections, and your deepest inner values.
It has to be so crystalline in its clarity that it actively dictates your micro-decisions on a random Tuesday afternoon.
But here is the massive friction point that most self-improvement advice just completely ignores.
What's that?
Motivation is completely, utterly useless if your deeply held underlying identity contradicts your conscious goals.
Oh, absolutely. The identity always wins.
You cannot simply think or visualize your way into a new life.
Because the psychological burden of the old self is immense. Cognitive dissonance will not allow you to operate outside of your established self-image for very long.
So if your North Star requires you to be a disciplined, prolific creator, but your deeply held internal identity is, I am a perpetual procrastinator who absolutely needs the anxiety of a looming deadline to perform.
You will inevitably sabotage your own efforts. The mind hates contradiction and will always revert to the established identity to resolve the tension.
The only way to resolve that tension permanently is that you must act your way into a new identity.
Action precedes belief.
Yes, every single action is a cast vote for the type of person you are becoming.
If you want to be a writer, you do not wait to feel a sudden surge of mystical inspiration.
You sit at the desk, stare at the intimidating blank screen, and cast a vote by typing a single terrible sentence.
You build the identity through undeniable evidence of action.
But attempting to do this through sheer, unassisted willpower, just muscling through it every day, it's exhausting and usually ends in failure.
Which brings us to the ultimate, most effective leverage point in all of human behavioral change: curating the ecosystem.
Editing the environment?
You must ruthlessly edit your physical and social environment, because willpower is a heavily finite resource.
Like a battery that drains.
Exactly. The concept of ego depletion shows that the more decisions you make resisting temptation, the weaker your resistance becomes as the day progresses.
So if you rely on raw willpower alone, you will mathematically fail eventually.
You have to eliminate the noise at the source.
You must physically remove the digital slot machines from your pocket.
Yes. If you are trying to reclaim your fragmented attention and cast devote for a focused identity, you cannot have a device engineered by armies of behavioral psychologists specifically designed to hijack your dopamine system just sitting casually within arm's reach.
It's an unwinnable war. You have to clear the physical clutter that constantly pulls at your visual processing center.
Furthermore, you must aggressively distance yourself from the social voices that constantly echo your lowest frequencies.
Oh, the social environment is huge.
It is. If your social ecosystem continuously normalizes stagnation, chronic cynicism, and the desperate pursuit of superficial comfort, your internal thermostat will constantly be fighting the ambient temperature of your peers.
That is a battle of attrition you will eventually lose.
So it is about engineering a visceral sensory shift in your daily architecture.
Just picture the reality of this new environment for a second.
Go ahead.
It's the crisp, immensely satisfying sound of closing a heavy notebook at the exact moment a focused work session is completed.
I love that sound.
It's the visual, expansive calm of a sparse, meticulously clean desk with absolutely nothing on it except the specific tools you need for the current task.
Total visual clarity.
And it's the quiet, deeply grounding power of walking outside in the early golden light of morning, listening to the complex rustle of the wind instead of the synthetic, algorithmic hum of a digital screen.
You are curating a space that literally whispers to your nervous system, this is who we are now.
You are intentionally building physical and digital boundaries that make the desired constructive behavior almost effortless.
And the destructive, decaying behavior extraordinarily difficult to execute.
We spend so much time culturally beating ourselves up, thinking we just need more inherent discipline, more grit, more internal fire.
If I was just stronger.
Right. But maybe we just need to build environments where discipline is the absolutely only logical option available to us.
That is the very essence of systemic design.
Make the right choice the easy choice.
Exactly. If the hyper-palatable, highly processed food is entirely absent from the house, the amount of discipline required to not eat it drops to absolute zero.
Because it's just not there.
If the smartphone is physically locked in another room during a deep work block, the discipline required to not scroll completely disappears.
A meticulously designed environment acts as an external exoskeleton for your willpower.
That's a brilliant way to put it. An exoskeleton.
It holds your structure upright when your internal muscular strength inevitably wavers.
As we step back and view this immense journey from a broader perspective, moving from the passive unconscious architecture of ruin to the deliberate systemic curation of a new reality, the absolute clearest takeaway is that human beings are not static creatures.
We are not monuments carved in rigid stone.
No, we are boundless, highly adaptable systems of potential, waiting desperately to be brought into alignment.
We are continuously processing environmental inputs and generating behavioral outputs.
And the exact moment you stop playing the victim to your inputs and take radical responsibility for the programming of that internal system.
The entire landscape of your life changes.
When you finally stop fighting the natural current of the water, when you stop relying on the fragile volatility of fleeting moods and the exhaustible reserve of frantic willpower,
And instead choose to build a sturdy vessel specifically designed for the rough waters you wish to navigate.
the exhausting struggle dissolves into pure momentum.
You stop coasting, and you finally start steering.
As we conclude this exploration into the mechanics of the self, I want to leave you with a final lingering question to turn over in your mind during the quiet, solitary moments of your day.
Let's hear it.
We have established today that every single action you take, no matter how microscopic, is a literal vote for the person you are becoming.
Every action is a vote.
So, what is the ballot you are casting in the profound silence of this very moment? Are you casting a vote for the fading ghost of your past? Or are you voting for the architect of your future?
Because tomorrow morning, when the room is dark, the refrigerator is humming, and the floorboards are cold against your bare feet, you will have to make that choice all over again.